Hare Krishna. Today we're having a panel discussion on how to support victims of domestic abuse. And this is to facilitate a discussion for the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is a UN Women's Initiative. So today I've got Rambhoru Dasi and Radharani Devi Dasi, who are going to help us understand more deeply how to support devotees who've been a victim or who are now a survivor of domestic abuse. So Rambhoru Devi Dasi, would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yes, well, as you say, my name is Rambhoru Dasi, and I'm a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami since 50 years. Been a member of ISKCON. I'm also the founder and director of something called Karuna Care Education, which is a non-professional chaplain training program for ISKCON devotees. I have been a professional chaplain in the United States since almost 20 years, and I'm a certified chaplain educator with the Association of Clinical Pastoral Educators. I'm the director of St. Camilla's Center for Spiritual Care, Urban Interfaith Chaplaincy in Los Angeles. So I'm training professional and non-professional chaplains. So that's where I enter this dialogue as a person who is offering emotional support and spiritual support to people who are in crisis, and many of whom have gender-based violence or abuse on board as they reach out to help from myself. That's where I enter.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself, Radharani Devi Dasi?
Hare Krishna. I am Radharani Devi Dasi. I am a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. I was initiated in 93, that is 30 years ago. And I have been doing counseling, marriage counseling. I am a clinical psychologist, my profession. I've also been trained in marriage counseling and many other interventions like emotional behavior therapy, solution-focused grief therapy, rational emotive behavioral therapy from Albert Ellis Institute, New York, and many other therapies of that sort, which help in the counseling and with the therapy. So I have been doing work with people who have undergone trauma of different sorts. In marriage, a lot of cases of domestic violence come to me from the community as well as outside the community. So this is a topic of great interest to me because I feel that it's very, very important to help these survivors of abuse and motivate them to become more proactive, to take action so that they can come out of that cycle of abuse and lead a fulfilling life. So that is my goal when I reach out to these people. So to connect them to resources that they never were ever aware about before, so that they can work on, function on their own strengths.
Thank you. So our topic is quite a serious one. We want to be able to support devotees in the community to possibly reach out to others who they see who might be suffering and give them some support or even just understand what they've been going through a little bit. And our focus today is on the long-term impacts on women and children. So if either of you would like to discuss some general things about the impacts of domestic and family violence on a woman and her children, that would be great. And we can go into more detail later if we need to.
Yeah, well, I am very interested in this adverse childhood experiences test. I often, as I talk about trauma, I have my audience take this 10-point test. And one of the things that predicts a child's traumatic experience, but also for the rest of their life, their mental and even physical health has to do with their early life experience in their families, and one of those things is being a witness or watching their mother being abused, battered, shamed, verbally abused, dismissed, and the impact on the child's brain as growing up, even as a small child, is major. And it will predict whether they have chronic depression or even diabetes or high blood pressure and so many other psychosomatic illnesses. So it's a big thing, the impact on children. It travels in the nervous system, even through epigenetics. They've discovered that if a woman is pregnant and she's being physically or emotionally or even sexually abused, beaten, the child in the womb now inherits that anxiety and trauma. It's just internalized through the nervous system. So it's a major impact. Very concerning, especially as our religious faith and our scriptures are promoting the protection of women, because for this very reason, you can cultivate a healthy society, or you can damage the future of society if women and children are not cared for. So there's research to support that. Yeah.
That's very true, that there's always that intergenerational trauma that happens. It passes on from one generation to another. So therefore, whenever we see clients, if we find that they are having relationship difficulties, marital conflict, so the first question we find out is, how was the relationship between your father and your mother? And generally, that is the root of the problem. And the irony of the situation is, the son hates the father for what he did to his mother, but now he's become his father.
Yeah.
And he's doing the same thing. And when they are made conscious of that, then that sometimes it just strikes a chord within their heart, and then they are willing to work on themselves. So this happens very often. Also, we see that there are so many flashbacks that happen when somebody is abused. And it takes a lot of time to heal. So generally people feel that they are overreacting. They are just trying to do things to gain attention, but it's not that. They're actually undergoing that pain, and they're reliving that past again and again. So therefore, that help, that support, mainly insight into their trauma itself, can help us to gain empathy. So I think one of the main things for giving support to them would be that we ourselves have insight what they are going through.
Yeah.
How we can help them.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Just validating their experience is huge, because it is like that when perhaps a woman gets triggered and she's becoming defensive because maybe her boundaries are violated or she's been disrespected. And so people will then, make her feel like that she's not justified in being defensive, when in fact she's just trying to feel safe or defend herself or to protect herself from past abuses. So we can be really helpful if we just validate as we listen to their story. Yeah.
Yeah, and understanding what they are going through and validating, as Mataji rightly put it, is a very, very important factor for these survivors. Because most of the time, they have been shamed or they have been made to feel guilty that maybe in some way you called for it, you asked for it, by, maybe you did something wrong, especially in Asian countries, in India especially. That happens very often, that there is a specific behavior that is expected from the women, and and then you blame them that maybe you did not behave properly, maybe you didn't do your duties properly, and that's why this happened. So to get it into even the mind of the victim, to make them understand that abuses can never be right. Abuse is never right. Even if you have done something wrong, there are better ways that the partner can use to explain to you what went wrong and how they could be, how we could do things differently so
Yeah.
that we can work well with each other.
Yeah.
And abuse never works. And as I think from Australia only, I got that quote that love never hurts. So there's a difference between love and control. A very
Yes.
thin line of demarcation between the two. So what to speak of the abusers? Sometimes those who are abused themselves, they are not able to understand that boundary, that difference between the two. And that's why they get confused. That's why so many times that gaslighting happens. They're confused whether he really cares for me or he doesn't care for me. Because that's the way the people talk to them. They convince them that they are wrong and that they deserve this. So one of the things we do in therapy is always tell them that you deserve much better than this. Nobody deserves abuse. So that's one thing that happens.
Yeah. Sometimes people say, you made me do it. You provoked me, but everybody's responsible for their behavior and their feelings. So you're absolutely right. Victim blaming is very popular, to blame the victim. You made me do it. But everybody is really responsible for their behavior. So as you say, there are other ways. If you're actually in a loving relationship, then it's a moment to have a conversation. They did research in America at one point in terms of domestic violence, and sometimes people throw things, pots. They throw a pot, they throw a pan. And what they found was that when they trained couples to have an emotional vocabulary, to be able to say, instead of throw a pot out of anger, to say, I'm really angry, what actually stopped the domestic abuse. And so I would say having a conversation and being able to talk about one's feelings could be a way forward in couples stopping physical or even emotional abuse, to be able to own what I'm feeling right now instead of throwing something, throwing bad words or pots. Be a good thing.
I found one website which was named Honey, Let's Talk. Talking makes things better.
Yeah.
Because when there's open communication, but very often people are scared to even talk because they don't know what will come up, what will. I remember I was told that in Australia they put these banners or the contact numbers of the organizations that would help in women's changing rooms and in places where women's bathrooms, the washrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Because outside they are scared to even look at the board and make a note of the number, because if their partner sees them doing it, they might be punished for looking at it and making it appear that they have a partner who is abusive. So things like that also, things can go to that extreme. And yes, they do this gaslighting where they make the other person feel they are wrong, where they get really confused. And then there's a cycle of abuse that you all know about. There's the honeymoon phase where they will go, they will tell them, I love you, and then give them a gift, and then tell them that, I love you so much. Why do you make me do this? As you said, why do you make me behave in this manner? So then they actually start feeling that they are wrong. And that's where the problem sets in, because they can't leave, because either they feel they are wrong, or they feel that if they leave, then who will take care of my child? There's so many reasons why they are not even able to take that hand that is willing to help them, because they themselves not sure what they should do. So part of it is creating awareness for them, and also creating awareness in the outside world to make them understand what the survivors are going through and what sort of help they need. One is the tangible help, and one is the creating of awareness so that people can actually take that help.
I'm going to just say here that in Australia, we have an author called Jess Hill, and she's written a book that took her 6 years to write called See What You Made Me Do. And it's about 300 pages, and it's available in libraries, but it's a fantastic read for both professionals and for people who are worried about their own safety, and to try and understand that cycle of abuse and how this man sometimes appears to be very loving and caring, and then in the next few days it's very different. So thanks, Radharani, for explaining a little bit about that cycle of abuse. I think if you could talk some more about that, it'd be really helpful for people who either don't understand much about domestic violence or people who are in a domestic abuse relationship.
Yeah, the cycle of abuse is such that it begins with the person trying to trigger a situation. The abuser, he tries to create a situation in which there would be a discussion, and then he can, there could be an outburst on his part. It's like a drama director setting up the stage for the scene. He will create that situation, and then he will become violent. Either it will be an emotional outburst, or it will be violent, physical violence, or whatever, humiliating in different ways. There are some people who will stop the woman from working, not going for a job, because if they are financially independent, then the husband might lose control over them.
Yeah.
People turn their children against the mother. They talk ill about the mother all the time to the children, so that even the children, like I had a case where the woman was educated, she was a professional. She was not able to come out because of the kids, and eventually the kids turned against her. That's when she took the step to move out from that house. So this happens all the time, and the cycle of abuse is first, there is the trigger. Then there is the actual violence or the abuse, where either sexual or financial, physical, emotional, any type of abuse may happen. Then after that, there is that honeymoon phase where he will behave nicely, then he will try to make her feel guilty, and he will try to make her feel as if she was responsible for the entire thing. And she'll start thinking, maybe I imagined some of the things, because now he's behaving so nicely with me. And then comes the period where again, it cools down. And then she's thinking what I should do, what I should not do. And then again, the same thing happens. So that's a continuous cycle that happens. So if the person is continually bad, at least they are sure that, I should move out from here. But when he becomes good suddenly, then again there is confusion in him, especially where there are children, because they feel that the children need their father. Am I doing the right thing by moving away from here? And then there's so much confusion. Actually, even before they have kids, she would have noticed the red flags. Even during her courtship days, she would have noticed those red flags. But they have the thought that in our inventory, the marriage inventory, we have this question, this point that I saw the red flags during the courtship days, but I thought it would get better after marriage. Or after marriage, I saw the red flags after marriage, but I thought it would get better when we had kids. But it doesn't. So during premarital training, this is a point that we bring up and we discuss it very thoroughly. If you see any red flags, communicate with each other now. It's not going to change after marriage. Talk now, clear it now, make sure now. They know already, but they have not been able to come out. When they come out of it, then it's a great relief for them. It's a great relief.
Thank you.
Another thing to add to that is religious abuse. Where you will take a spouse will take scripture, some kind of injunction. Women are, less intelligent. They're stupid. They're 9 times more lusty, and their duty is to be unconditionally servile and not be seen and not heard, and all of that. And if a woman has an opinion or wants to say something or have a choice about her own life, then scripture is used to to try to shame and guilt that you are not Krishna conscious. A Krishna conscious wife would obey their husband unconditionally, without question. And because everybody who's on a spiritual path, they want to be a devotee. We want to serve Krishna and Prabhupada. If you tell a woman enough how stupid she is, she starts to believe it herself, and now she isn't even sure if she has an intelligent idea, whether that I'm kind of crazy. You really start to believe that after so many years, and women lose the confidence to be able to have a voice, and they no longer even think for themselves. They've lost that ability. Yeah.
So
I think that's the impact of trauma. It becomes a trauma if every day you're told the same thing. It's traumatic.
And so you've both talked about the impact on women and children, and how the cycle of abuse can happen, and how it affects the wife, and then it affects the children as well. And even to the point where you gave that example, Radharani, that children can turn against their mother. So it is a very grave thing. And as Rambhoru Mataji said, we are in the situation where there can be religious abuse on top of all of those other abuses. And this can be another reason women might stay within a relationship, because they fear so many things, doing the wrong thing, not being a good devotee, etc. So maybe you've also just started you've just started touching on the consequences of being in an abusive relationship, and you've talked about a woman doubting herself. Maybe you'd like to talk about some of those other results in a woman's psychology when she's been experiencing domestic abuse. And it might not have only been in a partnership, it might have been in childhood, but you could maybe talk about what are the impacts on somebody who's experienced abuse.
One of the main factors, that the symptoms that we see, is very low self-esteem, which affects all their relationships.
Yeah.
Because when one has low self-esteem, then one thinks that everyone is seeing them through the same lens. Sometimes their partner, they may have been abused in childhood by parents or someone else, but even though their partner may be very supportive, but because they have undergone abuse, they feel that everybody is seeing them in the same light and trying to exploit them. So they are not able to take even that support many times in the right way. And then they misbehave, and then, or they become very aggressive, and then later on they regret it. They regret that they are behaving in that way. And then they tell the partner that you should understand me, what I'm undergoing. So one of the main things that survivors of childhood abuse really need to do is heal themselves before entering into a relationship. Because if they have the thought process or understanding or belief or expectation that their partner will heal them, that doesn't happen. They are not equipped with the knowledge or the skills to heal them. They can at the most provide some support to them if they are undergoing some treatment. But when they expect the partner to heal them, the partner gets completely bewildered because they don't know what to do. Right? So they may just act normally, and then it creates problems. So this low self-esteem, and also because of the trauma, the flashbacks that happen. If there's been sexual abuse, then it affects their physical relationship after marriage. Right? So many problems come up after marriage. Main thing is the low self-esteem and the insecurity. So many in psychology, we talk about one disorder called borderline personality disorder, which is the main problem there is their fear of losing out, or the fear of losing a particular person from their life. losing relationships. So there they have a lot of insecurity because they did not have secure relationships. So John Bowlby, one of the psychologists, he talks about this, about the importance of security and stability in childhood, because that is what forms their future. So once anyone understands this, they can understand what trauma people undergo when they have undergone abuse in childhood or they have witnessed abuse in childhood. This is a very simple example is given. There's a circle of security, which I'm sure you both have heard about it, but just for the benefit of those who are hearing, that a child, when it's born, it wants to be with the mother. It feels very secure. As it grows, it starts moving away from the mother, but it keeps turning and looking back to see whether the mother is still there. And then it is confident that my mother is there for me. Then it goes a little more ahead. And then it again turns. So this way, as it grows, the distance, it is able to move away from the parent while being confident that when I come back, my parent will be there for me. And gradually the child internalizes the parent or the primary caregiver in their heart. Right? So even if they are a little away from the parent, they are not worried. They are not insecure because they have experienced that my parent is there for me. Right? And that gives them stability, security in their relationships later on in their life too, because they are confident about relationships. But imagine if those parents are abusing them instead of being there for them, then what must be happening to that child? Or if that child is seeing his father abusing the mother, then mother is his primary caregiver, what must be happening to that child? So they undergo a lot of insecurity. So they are insecure in relationships, because of which they become very possessive when they enter a relationship. They have very high expectation. They want to be all the time given time because they need that to be secure. And that creates a burden on the partner and then a burden on it brings pressure on the relationship. So like this, in many different ways, it can affect the relationship.
There's another piece I want to add to that, in terms of stages of faith, how childhood neglect and abuse impacts one's ability to have faith in God. If a child is crying and the caregiver doesn't respond, they're busy, preoccupied, they just never respond, or they don't respond in a caring way, then a child grows up believing that there's nobody outside of themselves, nobody that's a higher power that will respond when they cry. And that's actually what prayer is. We cry out for God or that which is greater than ourselves. And we don't really have faith that there's going to be a response. So right from this early childhood experience, a child is developing their ability to have faith in God or not just by their quality of their relationship with their parents. So it's a huge thing. There have been two psychologists who are theologians who study that, and they came to the same conclusion, that domestic abuse, child abuse is, or care, the quality of the care with the child makes or breaks their ability. So sometimes parents are scratching their head, I can't figure it out. I go to the temple, I'm a great devotee, I do everything right, but my kids, they don't have any interest. So you might want to look back at what you're parenting, what kind of quality of parenting when your children were early in their life, were you really responsive and attentive and emotionally sensitive to them? Just really, really huge. Also, Srila Prabhupada says, I can't tell you exactly the quote, but he used to say that child neglect was the cause of criminality. And so we may wonder, why sometimes our kids don't become devotees. Well, it could well be. Maybe they go to jail. We have devotees kids who go to prison and they get into trouble in so many ways. And it has a lot to do with the quality of their parenting as kids. And I did ISKCON prison ministry for many years, and most of the prisoners, if you look into their history, they come from deeply child neglected, abused, sexually abused, beaten up, verbally abused. And when another prisoner comes in and they find out that the reason he's in prison is he's been a pedophile, they pretty much kill him while he's in prison because they're so triggered by their own abuse, having been abused. So it's very complicated, you know. The responsibilities of parents is enormous, caring for kids.
That's so true. Like as you said, there's so much research which shows that people who have this antisocial personality disorder, most of them come from broken homes. I remember when I was doing homeschooling with my children for some time. So Yashoda, my Mataji from Vrindavan, was helping us with some courses that we could use for the kids. And she showed us a movie at that time, Ron Clark. In that they show that he's a teacher and he's given a classroom where all the children are coming from such families. And at first he gives up on the kids, but then when he actually goes to their homes and he sees what sort of families they come from, then he understands why they are behaving the way they do. And then he finds alternate ways of teaching them, supporting them, and he sees that there is some improvement. So it's just so important that how parenting is done. Very, very important. Thank you for touching the spiritual part. Yes, definitely. If our immediate caregivers don't appear to love us, we don't get love from immediate caregivers, then how is one to put faith in someone so distant as God? If your parents love you, then you will believe that God loves you. Your own parents don't show that love. How can you believe? How can you trust that somebody else somewhere far away, distant, whom you are not seeing, loves you?
Well, this is where, in my view, the Hare Krishna movement or any religious community has the responsibility to offer people a corrective experience. You know, many people come seeking unconditional love that we promise in the Bhakti tradition. We talk about it. We promise that this is the goal of life. We're here to develop love unconditionally for God, but that He loves us unconditionally. So as representatives of that unconditionally loving God, we have a responsibility to people who reach out to our communities to offer them the family they didn't have. Because most people come with broken homes or dysfunctional homes, feeling bereft of that loving care. So in my view, as a person who trains chaplains, you know, in the Karuna care, the whole goal of what we're trying to do is to help devotees understand how do we give a corrective experience to people coming. And you can't do that unless you healed yourself. So part of the training is learning to dig around in those old wounds and be able to learn how to grieve the pain and not to be always on the defense, but to be able to feel safe enough. And people don't do that deep work unless they feel safe and trust that if they bare their heart and they're transparent and honest, that people will now not be judging them and criticizing them and advising them. You know, they are expecting, because we promise unconditional love, to be loved unconditionally, and that means unconditionally. So it may be that we don't agree on things, but to be able to speak in a way that demonstrates respect and care, even though you might be different than me. You know, that's personalism, is that we can be different and love each other too. No, we don't have to be the same. But in the material world, people are trying to make you the same because it's easier to manage robots than individuals. So that for me is really, really where my heart is in terms of being a responsible devotee, means adding that piece that's missing, you know, and being able to create safety for people who are wounded, and we all are wounded, clearly. But looking past the trauma symptoms to the heart that's perfect, pure, Satchidananda, you know, unconditionally wise and joyful, you know, if we can see that in the person. What is that verse in Bhagavad Gita? self-realized soul sees a Brahmin, a cow, a dog eater, seeing.
Vidya Vinay Sampanne.
There you go. That's a discipline. It's a practice. It's part of our sadhana. It's not easy to do, but to be able to remember who you're talking to as a temple of God, of Krishna's in everyone's heart, and we have to get to that place, that heart space, and try to help people connect with that space in themselves, but in all others. So that's kind of where my sadhana goes. It's not an easy thing. We have our own lenses, but also trying to penetrate the lenses and the defenses and the strategies of defense of others too. It's not easy.
Now that you say that, I was just remembering an analogy that His Holiness Radharani Swami Maharaj had given us. He said he was traveling by flight and there was a child who was screaming and crying, and everybody was turning back and giving dirty looks to the parents. Some people were trying to read, maybe some were trying to sleep, some were eating or whatever. Everybody was doing their own stuff and they were looking at the parents. Obviously, parents can't take the child and move out. The flight is already taken off, and the mother was desperately trying to calm down the child. So he said that everybody was thinking, why is this child screaming so much and disturbing all of us? He said, but what do you think the mother might have been thinking? That why is this child screaming? What is disturbing him? So that is the difference between just seeing and being compassionate. Feeling for the other person. So judging them for screaming or trying to understand why they are screaming and trying to see how we can help them.
Yeah.
In fact, we are conducting now seminars on for creating awareness on domestic violence. So we show some snippets, some videos. So in one of the videos, we show that this woman is being abused by her husband, and her office colleagues notice. Like some notice that she's every day putting a lot of makeup on her face, and they wonder why she wastes so much time doing makeup. Because she wants to hide the bruises that are there on her face. And then, she always makes excuses for leaving early, why she's coming late. And somehow they understand. And then they help her out. They tell her, look, we are there with you if you need help. And then she calls the police and she does the needful. So we make this point during that seminar that it's not about you. You might wonder why we are asking all of you to come for this seminar. You may not be having any problems, but at least if you are aware and you are watchful, you might observe that someone else is undergoing these type of problems and you can reach out to them. Because otherwise, if we are only thinking that if it's my problem, then I will do something. No, it's because these people need that emotional and physical support for them to take that big step. It's very important.
If we could orient the conversation more along those lines, Radharani, and talk about, an example of what we might see in the community. So, I might not be experiencing domestic violence myself, but I don't know much about it. What might I see with a mom and a child? What might I notice and go, oh, this doesn't seem right. I get a funny feeling about this. I wonder what's going on there. Maybe you could give us some examples of behavior that we might see that might give us red flags, and we can explain how this is potentially domestic violence happening in the home.
Yeah, one is when the woman sort of starts reducing her interaction with her friends, with her relatives, not having too much communication and giving excuses. Oh, I'm very busy. Oh, no, he wants me to do this. He wants me to do that. Breaking relationships, moving away from those relationships, or suddenly leaving her job for no reason at all. And you can realize that there's been a shift in that person's behavior. A person who used to talk a lot is now speaking only in monosyllables. Yes, no, when you call them up, not opening up, not coming for programs, not visiting their parents. So many things you can notice that there's definitely something different with the person, and then they are having emotional issues, health issues are developing, psychosomatic problems, body ache, headaches, so many problems come up. So then you can make out that there is a problem, or someone else comes and tells you that I think she has a problem. She is not allowed to go out of the house at all. And many times I call her up and suddenly abruptly she keeps the phone down. So then we can check with them that if you are having any problem, is there any problem? So many times they don't open up because they are scared to speak. So then you can tell them that if you have any problem, please, let me know if I can help you in any way. And if you can't speak right now because there's someone around, I understand. Maybe you can message me at the time that we can speak. So that way you can make the person at least realize that someone has noticed and somebody can help you. So at least when we do these seminars, people know that such things happen and that they need help. And they may not be able to help directly, but at least they can connect them to a resource, mainly to their own family first. Right? In India, there is that stigma that how can I leave my husband and go? But sometimes there are people who will not take that step because they are worried that if I leave my house and go, then will my parents take me back first thing? If they have other daughters, then they'll be worried how will they get married if the elder daughters come back. So that's one thing where we have to talk to them and tell them there's no such thing. People are educated now, people understand. So if your husband is abusive, you're not expected to stay with him. Come back home, and from home, then you can coordinate. And that's when you come to know whether he really cares for you or not. Is it something that is a natural behavior that he has, which he is not able to control, and that is why he is doing it? If it is that way, then when you leave him, he will actually take steps to get you back. He will be ready for taking counseling. He will immediately take some action to work on himself so that you come back, if he really cares for you. If he doesn't care for you, he will blame you. He will not accept that he is wrong. He will blame you and try to become even more aggressive to get you back. So but just by seeing their reaction or their response to the interventions which have been done or the steps that you have taken, you will know whether he is genuine or not. Okay? So when you explain to them, then they understand, and then they take that step, and then they see that behavior. They say, yeah, actually this happened. I left because he physically beat me and he did this, that. And then he calls me up and he tells me, you are the reason for this. You are the one who created all the problem. I'm going to lodge a police complaint against you. Like, stuff like that. So making them aware, making people aware also that such things happen so that they can reach out, connect, and get them connected mainly first to their own people. But please speak to your parents about this so that they can reach out to you and they can help you. Don't assume that they will not take you back. Don't assume that you will be a burden on that family. The most painful thing for a parent would be to see their child suffering. So first, connect with your parents and then try whatever interventions are possible. Take psychological help if needed. And after that, if nothing works, then file a police complaint. Yeah? File a police complaint so that the action gets completed. The whole process is completed. So whatever happened.
Yeah. I know I'm thinking of a case that we had in a temple I was visiting in the United States. I was connected to that temple, and there was a woman who we noticed in the community would come for the Sunday feast, but she was losing weight, and she was not used to take care of her. Her hair was not combed. You could see that she hadn't washed, and she would sit in the back. And meanwhile, her husband was telling the other members of the community, "Oh, this woman, I don't want to take care of anymore. She's crazy." And he went on, and nobody would talk to her. Everybody's saying she's an eyesight. Let's get her out of here. She doesn't belong here. She's a bad person to be. Nobody wants to see anybody like that in the community. But I went over to talk with her at that moment just to see if I could understand, rather than judging her, or find out is there something going on. And it turned out that she had chronic depression. She was being beaten and also starved. Her husband wouldn't give her money to buy groceries, so she was locked in the house. And she came to the temple to get some prasadam and some care, but he didn't. He painted the picture like she was a crazy person, and he didn't want to take responsibility for her anymore. But it was really her being abused in a terrible way and kind of entrapped. Her visa was hooked up to his visa. And of course you can threaten, well, I'm going to send you back to India, or I'm going to tell the authorities you don't have a visa, or throw your passport away, and now you're a prisoner in your own home. So she was very, very depressed and abused. But unless somebody reaches out and sits down, they may not want to talk in the beginning, they may not know you from anyone, but being able to be present and create safety and really communicate that I care about you, and abide by them, accompany them. Most women don't have the courage to do this on their own, and they need an ally, somebody who cares enough to find out what's really going on, ask a question. Yeah,
That's very true. That is their first strategy, to try to block all the other resources that the person may have access to, so that they are completely dependent on them, the abuser.
Yeah, it's
Not their
misuse of power. It's abuse of power, really.
very much.
Money is power,
And as you say about the passport and stuff like that, that happens so often. They take all the papers of the children, the school admission, whatever the important documents are there, and they keep it with them, so the person cannot move out. They make it very difficult, basically, for the person to move out. And even sometimes after they move out also, they stalk them, they keep phoning them, they keep messaging the children, and they create difficulties for the family. So
one thing I've noticed also, just in talking to people who have a lot of abuse in their background, is that when we try to communicate, I notice that they edit out. It's very hard to get them to respond in a direct way. You might ask a question or something, but there's a kind of a constant dodging or trying very hard not to really speak the truth. So you can see that there's a whole editing out of speaking in global language and kind of dissociating, and you may ask something, but they answer something totally different. They can't stay present with you because they're trying very hard not to tell you the truth. And so there's this dance that goes on in conversation. And I always suspect, there must be something you're hiding, something you're trying hard not to share. But it's very obvious that there's something very painful there. And how do you penetrate that? And it really goes back to trying to create safety, not being pushy, not judging, not preaching at people, and just being present. And I always use this image of a dog that's been wounded, or an abused dog. How do we treat animals when they've been abused? What do we do with them? We don't come in a forceful way. We speak gently. We tread lightly. We feed them. We stroke them if they will let us. But the same thing with a wounded or an abused woman or an abused person. We have to tread very lightly and first develop safety and trust before we can go further. And that may take time. That may take weeks and months of communicating that I am not a person who means you harm. I'm here to care. And you may get a lot of kicks in the beginning, like a dog may, snap at you and bark at you and cringe and this, and it may take a long time. But if you're persistent and you truly care, they will see your heart and gradually open up. Or not, you have to be detached from the result. But that's for us, people who want to care. You have to be really patient, and it takes as long as it takes. Not to give people the freedom to unfold in their own time, just like you would with a wounded animal, and continue to offer that care in spite of how they're responding. I think that communicates something.
Thank you.
That's a very wonderful point that you made, that to give them that care, give them their space, because we don't want them to end up feeling the same controlled, that controlled feeling which they are already experiencing with their abusive partner. Because again, it will back that same feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've covered a lot of symptoms of a woman who might be experiencing abuse. Maybe you could talk about children, because in our communities, kids are a very big part of, temple events and festivals, the morning and the evening program at some temples, or house programs. So it might be in a situation where they're a little bit away from their parents, playing with their friends. You might be able to notice some things that would be red flags. Oh, why is this kid doing that? Maybe you could give us some examples of things to look for.
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm thinking.
So most of the symptoms that we observe in children who have undergone trauma is they tend to become a bit distant in their relationships. They don't open up so much. They don't trust easily. Obviously, they have trust issues. They have low self-esteem issues, and they have a lot of flashbacks, because of which they are not able to even focus on their own work or their studies many a times. And many times they might come with presenting complaints of social anxiety, but actually it is not social anxiety, it is trauma from abuse, because of which they panic. Like if they have been, that there is what is called as classical conditioning. If that person who has abused them, if there has been some music playing or there has been some lights or some sounds at that time, even that hearing that sound can trigger them, or those type of lights can trigger them. Anything that brings back that, that flashback of the past can trigger them, and then they cannot behave normally at that time. Sometimes they may faint, sometimes they may, have epileptic fits. Anything can happen, depends on how their body reacts to that trauma. The flight and fight response happens all the time. They're always on high alert. Otherwise, the flight and fight response is meant only to be in a situation which is life-threatening. And then it goes to the relaxation response. But when there has been consistent abuse in a child's life, then they cannot relax at all. They are always on a state of high alert, which means all those hormones, those hormones like cortisol, adrenaline are being continuously secreted in the body, which cause disease also. So physical problems, emotional problems, insecurity, all that, they cannot behave normally. Especially entering into relationships becomes a problem for them. They don't enter into relationships easily. You will find that some people will generally not get married, or they will get married very late in their life until they have healed. Many a times they would have not yet, confided in their parents. Something happened when they're 6, 7 years old. They have not yet confided. Once they speak, open up with their parents, they tell them, and when they get support from their parents, then they feel better. Or when the person who has made that mistake, who has wronged them, is punished, then they feel better. One of those, two things helps them to move towards getting better. But they really suffer a lot.
Sometimes you might, young people, teenagers, they will cut themselves. That's another symptom, or become compulsive eaters. You just that they're eating, overeating, compulsive activity, just being hyperactive. There's also another response, just not just fight, flight, and freeze, but you have this appeasing, this fawning, where you're all the time because of fear, trying to appease everybody, groveling, this kind of neediness where trying to please everybody because I'm afraid if I don't, I may get hurt. And watching also children as they interact. If you notice, sometimes there's a clique of children who get along, but then there's one who is more vulnerable. Maybe they're needy, maybe they're not cool because they don't know how to communicate, because they have abuse going on, there's fear. Then that will invite a kind of bullying by the others, which now re-traumatizes them. I've witnessed that, when you have a group of 14 girls together and their ages, say 9 to 12 or 13, it's like being in a herd of animals. They notice who's the weak one, the one who's insecure. They don't make it, they don't cut it. And often that particular girl has abuse going on at home. My parents don't allow me to do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And being afraid that they'll find out that they're not cutting it or something, making it. Just being submissive to everybody without discrimination, and wanting to be liked so desperately. Yeah.
And the other side as well, a child who's being abused can also become a bully and aggressive. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true too.
And
either they can be bullies or they can be people pleasers.
Yeah.
One of them.
But it's
pretty
often
much everybody.
it's often that the aggression is observable. The kids who make more noise and get complaints about than the introverted or quiet child, they get missed.
Yeah.
But what I understand is every behavior is a communication. So sometimes in communities it's hard to tolerate the naughty children, but actually there might be something going on there. Why are they like the baby crying? That was a great example. So why are the kids doing what they're doing?
Oh, absolutely.
So either they may be directly aggressive or they may be passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Which means their relationships, then they will, all that aggression will reveal itself at a certain point in their life. That will show.
Maybe we could talk about what would happen if we miss these signs and symptoms in a family, in the community. We might be busy about our service and not taking too much notice. And what happens if many people in the community miss these signs and symptoms?
As Mataji rightly said, first of all, these people may have suicidal ideation. They might actually attempt suicide with a view to ending their life, or they may try to cut themselves to gain attention, to bring attention to their distress. That is one thing. The self-harm can become a big risk factor. Second thing is people might end up labeling the person, as aggressive or as bad or as a black, as a black sheep, something like that. And then they live up to that label that has been given to them.
Yeah.
So that's really sad when that happens. Where they do sometimes, I've seen that they sometimes behave crazy because they want that attention. And then their relatives, I've seen it in many of my cases, that the relatives sort of withdraw from them because they are behaving badly. So it's like what we call as a self-defeating behavior. So then when those clients come to us, we explain to them that if you want attention, there are different ways of getting that attention. Because they come as a client with a problem that how do we go? Otherwise, we don't directly go and tell them. But if they come, we tell them that if you want attention, you want help, ask for help. Right? Because we come to the root cause of why they are behaving in a particular way, what they are gaining from it, like how is this behavior serving you in any way, or what is it helping? Then they say, no, it's not. I get this. Anyway, they are blaming me, so I might as well behave. So come to the root problem of what they actually want. So obviously, the main need is that they want support, they want love, they want to be cared. So then we try to help them with. We ask them, it comes from them. How do you think you can get that love and care? Have you been getting it with this, like, in this period of time, have you got it? How do you think you can get it? And then they come up with the solution. When they think themselves, they come up with the solutions, certain things, or sometimes we can also help them, because ultimately they want love and care, but they are behaving in such a way that they will not get it. So then that becomes a self-defeating behavior. That
Yeah.
can be a problem.
Yeah. Not knowing how do you get your need for love and belonging met. Yeah. That's a common problem in relational cultural theory that's considered to be the relational paradox, is that not just abused kids, but most of us in this culture who are dissociated because of collective trauma and generational trauma ourselves, we've developed behaviors that push people away, yet our heart is yearning for love and belonging. And so that's the paradox. It's something we all do. It's not just abused people. It's part of our culture. We don't know how to reach out and say, I need help, and be vulnerable. We're all defending ourselves in some way. So when eating, sleeping, mating, defending, that means we're still animals, in psychological defense as well as physical defense. It's all animals. We're still animals.
Therefore, what Mataji said is very important, that they need to see that unconditional love coming from at least one person in their life. Just one is enough for them. Somebody who understands why they are behaving in that manner and gives them, places trust in them, gives them that unconditional love and support, very gently points out to them when they are sort of transgressing, like, this is your goal, but what you're doing right now, is that leading to your goal? What can bring you back on the path that can take you to your goal? So very gently sort of nudging them rather than pushing them, so that they can come back on the path and they can actually achieve their goal. Then they are able to move ahead a little bit and gain some insight into the problem. So that one person being there is very important. They cannot do it on their own.
And it doesn't really require a specialist to listen. As a chaplain, we are not trauma specialists, but what we've learned is that even children, if they have had a traumatic experience, if they have one adult who's willing just to listen, let's just listen and let them talk about their experience, or draw their experience, using art to draw if they don't have the words to talk about their feelings or what happened to them. That will greatly minimize or reduce the impact of a traumatic experience if they have an adult who's willing to listen and giving them permission just to talk about their feelings. Most kids don't have any vocabulary. This is where your art comes in, being able to draw it. But anybody can do that. Just stop advising, judging, just be there and be a safe person. So anybody can do that if they care enough to hear, just to listen and validate their experience. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree that that's the right thing to do, but that to validate, I would probably be feeling like that too if I were in your shoes. That's already something. A start.
There was one video that I had seen where there's one man sitting on the beach and one lady comes up to him and starts ranting, sharing all her problems and yelling, and how can they do that? In the office, there's a problem. At home, there's a problem. The cab drivers, they create problems. Everywhere there's a problem. She goes on. And finally, she gets up and goes from there. And then he's trying to call out to her because she has left her mobile there. And then he's doing and calling her. So you realize he's dumb. He can't speak. And she's coming back, and then they show his back. And on his back, there is a poster stuck which says, I only listen, no advice, 50 rupees per hour. He can't speak. So they can come and they can just reveal their heart to him without them being criticized or advised or judged or anything. So they get some relief and then they go. So when Mataji said this, I just remembered that what people need is somebody who is willing to listen. Very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's how we digest our feelings, is by talking. And if it's out and if it stays in, it goes to our head, and we have now mental health issues, or it goes into our body, and we now have physical health issues.
Yeah, it also makes them feel that we are worthy of being listened to.
Yeah.
Generally, people like say that, "Oh, I don't want to listen to you, you're crazy," or something like that.
Yeah.
I care enough to listen to you. You
Yeah.
are worthy of my attention.
Right.
That also makes them feel better.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,